Hi, I'm Rich Baker from Rollin' and Riches, and this is Improv Breakdown.
When you're young, you got to move around a lot so that the coincidences that in retrospect seem like destiny can find you.
Any different things?
My hands. It's like,
Suggest I was that.
Yeah.
What?
you asked for it.
Yay!
Let's do it. Welcome to the Improv Breakdown. My name is Rich, and I'm extremely excited today to be joined by Paul Vaillancourt, improviser, instructor, author, actor, producer, TV writer, founder of the Iowa West, founder of the Revolution Theater, over 150 improv tips on YouTube, and probably a lot more on your resume that I couldn't even figure out. You were like Mr. Improv. Thank you so much for being on the Breakdown.
My gosh, thank you for having me. It's absolutely my pleasure.
You're the best. All right. Paul, at one point in your life, you weren't an improviser, and then you were. How did that happen?
Well, the prologue is that I did like drama club in high school, right? And that was all scripted shows and stuff, and I sort of liked doing that, but I wasn't super jazzed up about it. And when I left high school, I thought I was going to be a philosophy professor was sort of my arc, really. Now I have a degree, my undergraduate degree is in philosophy. And so I thought, I'll do that. And so, but when I was in college, like the first month of college, I met a guy named Thomas Gallahan, who's one of my best friends all through college. And he was in this group called Erasable Inc. Erasable and then INC period, Erasable Inc. Oh. And some people that he knew from high school had sort of started this improv group before we even got there. He was the same year as me, but they were like a year ahead of us. And so he was like, I'm in this improv show. Do you want to come and see it? And you know how you are in college. You're like, oh, okay, all right. I'll go do this, whatever this is. And so I went and saw it. And the first half of the show was they had rented like a theater off campus. We went to this theater off campus, and the first half of the show was all short form games. And the second half of the show was a Herald. And in the Herald, this guy was trying to figure out who made Muzak, right? Who made Muzak. So he's like questing, like after this idea, questing. And finally, like, towards the end, he's like, I'm going in there. And these two people jump out. They're like, no, you aren't. And he's like, yes, I am. He pushes past them. He goes in, and then these people sort of assemble around like a boardroom table. He's like, you make Muzak? Paul McCartney and Paul Simon and John Lennon? And then the guy who's Paul McCartney goes, right, we usually make the Muzak first, then jazz it up for everyone else. And I was like it totally like blew my mind. I was like, oh my God. And like I literally said, this is true, Rich. I literally said to myself out loud, but in a whisper, because it was a theater, I don't want to be rude. But I was like, that's what I'm gonna do with the rest of my life. And it was like perfectly clear to me, like a calling to the priesthood. I was just like, I found it. I found my thing. Here we go. Let's do this.
And people around you were like, he wants to make Muzak the rest of his life.
Exactly, right? Yeah, I was like just totally possessed by this idea. And so in a circuitous route, I ended up actually not the next year when auditions were, I was actually on a student exchange to California from Maryland. I was on student exchange, and I ended up getting into an improv group at Cal State Northridge. They were just starting an improv group at Cal State Northridge. And so I ended up getting in on this thing sort of on the ground floor and being part of that and sort of learning a ton of improv. And it was interesting because the improv that my school, University of Maryland, was doing was like all short form, and it's sort of dabbling in long form, but really short form. That was the crowd pleaser. And so they were doing that. And so, but when I came to Cal State Northridge, in a real lucky twist, this guy, George Gunkel, who was the theater professor, was kind of like it's crazy. I took 2 semesters of improv, got 6 credits for improv, which I was like, really? All right. But in the meantime, he was sort of investigating this idea as well, and came to it like on the investigation with us. And we read, there was no books at the time. This was like a million years ago, man. And so there's no books about it really at the time. So not even Truth and Comedy was written at this point. So we read like The Inner Game of Golf and The Inner Game of Tennis, like about sort of like really getting out of your head and being in the moment, being spontaneous, right? And then he got this guy, Randy Brenner, from the Spolin Players to come and coach us. So we had like we were doing short form, but we were also getting like this Spolin background. It was crazy.
Oh, wow.
It was really interesting. And so then when I went back to University of Maryland, I ended up sort of joining that group, Erasable Inc., and then eventually directing that group and then just doing improv wherever I could find it. I was living in Maryland, obviously at the time, and I ended up joining up with comedy sports in Virginia for a little while, and then I did obviously improv at University of Maryland for a while, and then I also ended up taking class from this guy who taught in the basement of the Department of Defense, and this was a long time ago, and we would just like sign in and then go into the basement of the DoD, and then he was teaching this random class, which I literally to this day, I've told the story 1,000 times, I cannot remember how I got to that class. How would I ever discover this class? But somehow I discovered it. And me and a couple of my friends, we went. And then I did this for a while. And then this guy knew Michael Gelman from the Second City. Do you know Michael Gelman?
Yeah, I had him 3 times, yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, what a great guy. Super cool. And he came and I have to sort of backtrack a tiny bit. In college, we went to what I think was maybe the first improv festival in the country, at least at the collegiate level. I mean, there was like there was the Southern Comfort sort of tour where Del and Sharna were training college teams to do improv, long form, and the Herald and stuff. But then this was like a college organized thing at Skidmore College, and there the guest, the big shot, the marquee guest was Michael Gelman.
Nice.
And so everyone at this thing, so all college students, bang, 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 we're doing short form. And I was the director at the time. I was like, let's do a Herald.
Yeah.
We had this short amount of time. We did a super compressed Herald. I was like, let's do it. Let's go and do this. And we did it. And then afterwards, I went up to him and I was just like, what did you think? What did you think of this? Because I thought that he would know, right? And he said, it's the gutsiest thing I saw all night. And we were like, oh my God. And I totally was set on fire by that thing. And then in a twist, later on, this guy who was running the DoD class, he knew Michael Gelman and brought him in for a 2-day intensive over a weekend. So again, I got to I was like, hey, I was at this festival. He's like, oh yeah. He said he remembered. He's very gracious. Whether he did or not, I was really taken by it. And so I said after this 2-day class, I was like eating it just as fast as I could. I was like so psyched about this class, and he was great, of course. And so at the end of this class, I said, I really want to do improv. What do you think is my next step? He's like, you got to move to Chicago. I was like, you got it. And 3 months later, I lived in Chicago. And I was living with my cousin for a little while, and then I ended up just sort of in Naperville, and then I ended up moving into the city, and then just it's all been kind of like all guns go since there. I did class at Second City while I was going to graduate school at Northwestern, and then directing the improv show there, the Meow Show, and then I ended up through the Meow Show meeting some people who brought me to the IO in Chicago, and that's really kind of the boom, that's really sort of the burst onto the scene of it all, you know?
Wow. So you were just so in love with improv when you saw it that when someone said move to Chicago, you were like, done. Like that's awesome.
Yeah, I didn't know there was any other sort of option at that point. I was just like, well, that's where it is. I was in my 20s, my early 20s, and I was like, that's the time you got to do stuff like that. And I'll sort of say this as a sort of coincidental thing that later on, working with Del Close, which was sort of the end game of it all. I was like, I want to work with Del Close. I'd heard his name, and he was just sort of this mythological figure at the time, because improv hadn't really sort of exploded in the way that it did very soon after. Mm-hmm. So he was just like this shadowy sort of mythological figure. I was like, that's the guy I really want to connect with, right? And so when I got to meet Del and work with him and stuff, I thought he had a lot of, he's a complicated character, let's just say that. But he knew a lot about improv. And so one of the things he said, though, one time when we were working, that sort of really described my story was, he's like, when you're young, you got to move around a lot so that the coincidences that in retrospect seem like destiny can find you.
Ooh, yeah.
And that was my story. I was like, yeah, sure, of course. If I hadn't done this, then I wouldn't have done that. And I haven't done this, I wouldn't have done this. And you just see this whole story kind of in retrospect, the way it all unfolds in retrospect, it seems inevitable. And looking forward, as the story unfolds before you, it seems haphazard and all chance. But in retrospect, it seems like, yeah, sure, of course, that would be that, and this would be this. And it's sort of like, even my journey within improv, like, was like, whoa, if I had started earlier, which I almost did, like getting into stuff, if I had started earlier, then I would have been sort of like, I don't know, how do I say this? I would have been sort of much more like my peers, right?
Yeah.
That we would all have been the same age, let's say, right? But I didn't. I started just a couple of years later. So I was just a little bit older, a little bit more mature, a little bit less parties, a little bit more intensity. And that really ended up serving me well in the long run, because I got a bunch of really great opportunities that really catapulted my learning, catapulted me forward in the art form. And it's sort of like, it reminds me of Outliers, where there's these kids that, like, once you sort of get into a groove, they're talking about hockey players, that these older kids were better than their younger peers, right? But then they would sort of like be better, so then they would get more opportunities for better coaching and better teams, and they would just keep getting better and better and better. And that was my arc as well. It's like, I was a little bit older, a little bit more focused on what it is that I wanted to do, and I feel like that really served me well, in the sense, not in a Machiavellian sense, but in the sense that, like, I was sort of bringing a little bit more, like, just a little bit more life experience to it. Yeah, and I think that in retrospect, of course, that really seemed to be a difference maker for me. Maybe 4 or 5 years of short form with me to my first day of class at IO, which a lot of people didn't bring. You know, a lot of people were just starting at IO. That was their first step.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah.
I've talked to Blue Streak. Am I on track? Am I off track? How am I doing?
You're doing great. Unfortunately, Zoom's doing a little bit of freezing here and there. So if I'm not responding right away, it's because Zoom's probably catching up. So apologies about that. But no, I'm hanging on every word. This is fantastic. So you've been at Improv for over 25 years, right?
Yeah. Since I'm 53 now, and I started when I was probably 23, wow. 22, 20, something like that. Yeah, for a while, because I saw that first improv show when I was a freshman in college.
Yeah. So
I didn't join that. Go ahead.
Oh no, I was just like, what is it about improv that a lot of people, get into improv for a little while and then they're kind of done with it, but you've stuck with it for a long time. Yeah. What is it that just keeps you sticking with it?
That's a great question. I feel like it's probably because it's something that I feel like you're never done. You're never done with it. Yeah. Do you know what I'm saying? You don't I know improv, period. You know what I'm saying? That's not a thing. You can always keep constantly learning. And I felt like these long stretches of plateau with my own work where I'm like, I feel pretty confident or I'm really struggling or whatever. And then you break through to the next level of something. And then you're like, oh, this is something new. This is something different. And then you can learn that. And then also, I think that really teaching as well has really kept me invigorated by it, because I keep meeting young people. Now I sound like I'm really old.
Yeah,
I keep meeting these young whippersnappers. We keep getting older and older. They stay the same age, but it's like I meet these new people just coming to improv, and it rings a bell inside of me of like, oh my gosh, right? This is, oh my God. And then seeing them make discoveries, and then just like being, entertained by them or challenged by them or whatever. It's like really fun. And it's like, I think I've always kept sort of a beginner's mind about it. And also, look, I've been super lucky. I was sort of like super lucky to be in a privileged population within a system that favors privileged populations. That's not lost on me. I had a lot of opportunities that made my struggle less and my success more. So that was, when something's easy and fun and you're sort of like getting, the adulation or whatever for it, it's easy to stay excited about it. But I think sort of in the longest run, I think it's because I just love it. I feel like you bring yourself to it. It's super simple and super pure. And you don't need a bunch of stuff. You need a couple of chairs, maybe. And that's it. And then you just sort of do it. It's a really pure sort of art form. What you bring to it is everything you've thought or learned, or movies you've seen, or books you've read, or conversations you've had, or things you've observed, or whatever. You bring your whole self to the work. And I think that's really, that all encompassing simplicity, I think is is part of it, is the thing. And also that I still remember that first scene that I ever saw that really caught me on fire. I think that just really rang a bell in me, and just I keep connecting back to that moment a ton.
Ah, I love it. I love it. I love it. I love it. Okay, so if you can think back to when you're going through classes, was there anything that you were taught, by teachers that when you got out and started doing the performing, like outside of class and doing it on your own, that you were like, oh, that doesn't actually work for me anymore. Like I've discovered like a better way or a different way, or that this just doesn't work, anything like that?
I think that maybe not so much performing, because I feel like I was lucky that the teachers that I had, I thought all brought something really great to me, and that I really learned and have been able to utilize in some ways. Or when I'm teaching, I realize, oh, I'm saying this that they said, whatever, and I think that's part of being a teacher is sort of the passing down of existing. You don't have to reinvent the wheel. You can just pass down this existing knowledge, something that works for you. Because again, because there's no end point, I can say I'm just a guy a little bit further down the road saying, come on, watch out for that. You could trip on that, or oh, this is good. Eat this berry on the way, whatever. I'm sort of like trying to just a little bit further down the road, sort of giving people sort of my experience, right? So, but I think that. Not so much in performing then, because I really sort of value what I learned from my teachers. But I think that sort of when I got to teaching, there were certain things that, like some exercises that I did because I was taught these exercises. But then as I did them more, I realized that doesn't really work for me, or I'm not getting the same bang out of it that other teacher was. And then that's where I started to probably sort of get my own voice as a teacher, was when I sort of started to depart a little bit and sort of search out like Sharni used to do this exercise called the six-sided where people would come in and they describe the six sides of the where and then play a scene in the where to use the where and stuff like that. Which when I did it in the class, and I think I may have done it twice over the course of the whole series there, but when I did it in the class, I really enjoyed it and I got a lot out of it. But as a teacher watching it, I was watching my students not get a lot out of it. And so I was like, well, what else can we do? And so I started doing touch to talk, which I think is a much far superior exercise in my estimation. And I saw students get tons of results out of touch to talk. So then I, jettisoned the one and adopted the other, and like that.
I love it.
But all the way along, sorry, I heard a woman say the other day, I wish I could remember what it was. It was a woman who was talking on a podcast or interview, and she was saying that the main thing of being a teacher is being a student of the student. Well, let's be super clear. This is not my quote, but I couldn't agree with it more. You have to be students of your students and really see, like, that's when I say, oh gosh, I'm not just like a recording of what I learned. I need to be a student of them and sort of see each. And I think that's part of what's kept it exciting too, is like every class, every dynamic of each student and then all the students together has been different and exciting and challenging in its own way. But I realized, being a student of the students is really kind of what I think is super valuable in terms of like the highest sort of calling of a teacher. Oh,
I love that so much. Yeah, because you teach the exact same exercises, verbatim to one group and another, and you're going to get totally different experience. Totally. They're going to get a different experience, and you're going to get a different experience.
Right, and there's some exercises that are like the hits. And you're like, if I teach this exercise, it's going to do great. It's pretty straightforward. It just has a great leverage to it, and people get something out of it super quickly. But even so, you still need to be awake and attentive and ready to see their take on it, because I've been doing this for a few years, and every once in a while someone will have come at an exercise sideways and you're like, wow, I've seen this 1,000 times, I've never seen that take on it. That's super interesting, and that kind of thing. So
so you fell in love with improv instantly, but like, did you know that you wanted to be a teacher right away, or when did that come into play?
No, I actually, that's a great question. I didn't really have any aspirations so much to be a teacher really at first, which is crazy because now I love it and I've just been doing it for years and years. But when I was in Chicago, at the IO in Chicago, basically the apprenticeship program, kind of the informal, unspoken apprenticeship program, was when you finished the program and you were on a team and doing this and that, then you would sort of come back to Sharna's level 1 class and sort of sit in on class, and every once in a while she would say, well, what do you think? You'd be like, maybe they should you try to give like a note totally. It was so the pressure was insane, but you would try to give a note or something that would say, this is what I think or whatever, and then she would sort of like take all this in. I mean, this is a horrendously flawed system, but this is what the system was.
What you had.
Exactly. And so I was like, but as I got more into it, I realized, the next sort of evolution after being a performer and getting on a house team, which was like the big deal, was sort of creating your own show, which we did, and then also then moving up to be a teacher. So I was doing that, and I became a coach off of this sort of like apprenticeship program. I became a coach. I got on the list or whatever, and then a team approached me to coach this team, and it was a bunch of great guys, and Amy Poehler and Tina Fey were on that team, and that was like the first team I coached, and it was great. It was all super fun, and Amy was like roommates with my girlfriend at the time, whatever. It was like a crazy like small community. It was like such a different time. There was maybe a couple hundred people. I knew like almost everyone that I was at the IO with, and now it's like thousands of people and stuff and that kind of thing. But it was like a real small community at the time, and really, really fun and different. But again, super flawed. Sure. But so anyway, I was a coach for a while, and that was really great. And that team did well, and that sort of thing. And so then I had taken Matt Besser was teaching this class, which was the deconstruction and the movie. It was like an 8-week class. You'd spend 4 weeks on the deconstruction and 4 weeks on the movie. Oh, wow. And because these are new forms that had just been invented, he and the family and Del Close had just invented these forms. It was like hot off the presses. and so they were performing it in these different shows, Dynamite Fun Nest or Three Mad Rituals. And so suddenly it was like this explosion, because at first all we had was the Herald, and all we had was the word pattern opening. And then now these things, they were working with Del, they were kind of like cracking it open until we all sort of had permission sort of to break the rules or break out of this little box that improv was at the time. So this class was the movie and the deconstruction. And I had taken the class, and my team, which at the time was called which at the time was called The Tribe, we adopted the movie as our signature form. And so everyone else was doing Heralds, and then we would do the improvised movie on like a Herald night or whatever. Yeah. So we were doing that. And so I was getting to know the movie more and more. So then Matt Besser and Matt Walsh and Ian and Amy got this idea that they were going to go to New York and start a theater and get a TV show. And it all came to pass exactly as they said. And so when they moved out and Matt sort of like left to go do this in New York, I don't know wherever I came with those guys, but they
who knows? It's a mystery.
I hope they're okay.
So.
But when they did that, when Matt moved out, I was just happened to be at the right place at the right time, and I inherited that class. Oh, wow. And it was really again, looking back, it was a coincidental confluence of elements where I had been doing that, and then like I said, I was just sort of a little bit more mature than my peers. I was really much more of the same age sort of group as the family, mm-hmm. which at the time was, I think, by all accounts, the best improv team in the world. Wow. Maybe. Entirely possible. So they were fantastic, at least as far as I can tell. They're fantastic. And so they so at the time they were sort of had reached their pinnacle, and everyone was kind of like, now it was like reaching escape velocity. Adam McKay went off to be at Second City and do some stuff. He was like there, and then Neil was at Second City, and then Ian, I think, was there for a little bit, and Matt was like sort of a work at his own. So the core team there was starting to sort of fraction. They were like shorthanded. And so one night, actually one afternoon, I get this call from Sharnon. She's like, hey, do you want to sit in with the family? And I was like, what? It was like basically playing Little League and then saying like, oh, the Yankees need a guy to come in and be whatever. So I was like, yeah, sure. And so I ended up sort of sitting in with them and kind of being their go-to sitting guy for a while until they ultimately disbanded. And then, so at the same time, I'd been working with them, and then Matt was going to move out, and and so it all kind of like added up to I inherited this class, and so that was really my first past coaching. My first formal teaching experience was that level 3. I remember now, level 3 class at IO in Chicago, which was the movie and the deconstruction.
Now, when I got to Chicago, it was 2005, and like, you know, I think a lot of the people that came when I got there, we all had stars in our eyes. We were trying to use Chicago as a jumping off point to get to SNL or sitcoms or Daily Show or whatever. Like, was that in? I mean, obviously, you know, the UCB happened and this, but like, were you there because you wanted to be an actor, or were you just like loving the stage improv, or like, what was that like?
I was really, I guess I didn't really have any sort of practical thoughts about that, you know, in the sense of like, where's this all going to go? Like in a big sense, I think I really just thought that I would sort of like move up the ranks and then maybe work at Second City, because that's really a professional sort of improv job. Yeah. And I thought I would sort of do that, but you know, I auditioned a few times for Second City, didn't get in. That didn't shake out for me, but that's okay because there was other doors that were waiting to open for me. And so I think that I was sort of maybe half-heartedly saying, oh, I'll be on SNL. Like I wasn't like, it was crazy because I wasn't really sort of like lusting after that. I wasn't really sort of looking for that. I think I was much more interested in being on the stage at Second City and much more sort of interested in just finding a way to keep improvising and to keep sort of growing with this art form, which at the time was still pretty small. As I said, it was pretty small. There was like, we were getting great houses and great audiences and stuff, but the amount of people doing it was small compared to now. Like pick a small theater or a small indie improv theater or whatever, and they had about the same amount of people as IO. Like IO was, you know, just sort of getting its feet under it really in a big way. And maybe it had been, let me think, really do some quick math. I think maybe by the time I got there, it had been there for maybe, or it's been a thing, like coalesced together as a thing. Mm-hmm. And it also had an identity change. Like at first, the reason it was called the Improv Olympic before the National Olympic Committee was like, you can't do that. People are going to get confused. I was like, have you seen improvisers and have you seen Olympic athletes? No one's going to get confused. But they had a strong enough case, so it had to go from Improv Olympic to IO or whatever. But at the time, like at first, before I got there, this was like the original of it. It was much more like comedy sports, and Sharna would get together teams of like cops and a team of rabbis, and they would sort of compete as more of a competition. That's how it started. And then she discovered Del Close teaching in this warehouse, this random, somehow she came upon him and realized that here's the goose that lays the golden eggs. Yeah. And she paid him $50 and a bag of weed, the legend says. And he taught this class and they were like, hold on a second. This is perfect. This is a great arrangement. And so they sort of teamed up and sort of created the next evolution of the IO. They kept the name for some reason. And then it turned into really an exploration of long form and the Herald and stuff, you know? So that's kind of what that was. And so, sorry, I lost my place. Oh, so I wasn't really thinking about, you know, I was aware, obviously, and I loved SNL, but I wasn't really thinking about that per se. I was really thinking about being a professional improviser and a teacher, and that's really as far as I thought about it. And I was sort of, my aspirations really were to go to Second City and to be at Second City.
That's amazing. You founded or co-founded, you know, that you were a driving force behind the IO West. Like that theater impacted thousands of people, gave so many people the opportunities to learn. And I mean, it was a big deal. What was the impetus for that? Like, tell me about the beginning.
Sure. That's a crazy story too, because I was in Chicago and I had been teaching at IO I've been in Chicago for like 6 years, right? I'd gone through Second City, gone through IO. I was teaching at IO. I was doing these different shows. I was doing sort of new shows. Miles came up with the show. We did that show. We came up with a show called Sue Your Ex that ended up being, it was called something else. Oh, Sue Your Ex, that became the game show Blame Game on MTV years later.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, correct, random. And we're just really doing it. But at the time, like I had auditioned for Second City like 3 or 4 or 5 times, and I just wasn't getting any traction in this idea. It just wasn't working out for me, which was super frustrating because it's like I really wanted to do that. And so, yeah, right. And so eventually I was like, well, I think I've done everything I'm going to do here. Right. And they're not going to close the city or whatever. So, I mean, little did I know. But I was like, I think I've done everything I'm going to do here. I think I'm going to try something else. And so my girlfriend at the time was going to move to LA. And I was like, that sounds good. And I had been to LA before because I was at Cal State Northridge for a year and this kind of thing. So I was like, oh, yeah. I was like, oh, maybe I'll go there and I'll do the Groundlings or something, because Groundlings was a thing already. They had been around for a while, even at this point. And so, but then I sort of had this thought, and I took Charlotte out to lunch. This is so reverse, so backwards. But I took Charlotte out to lunch, and I was like, hey, has anyone ever tried to franchise or buy the name IO from you? And she said no. And this is the most ironic part. She said no, because it doesn't really matter. It's the people that really matter and that really count. And I was like, yeah, I suppose that's true. I was like, but see, I said, here's the thing. I'm going to move to LA and I would like to have an IO in LA or Improv Olympic in LA. She's like, okay, well, let me think about it, whatever. And so she thought about it and we sort of agreed that was a good idea. And then I moved here and she put up some money at the beginning and then I started it and like that.
Wow.
Teaching classes and doing shows. And our very first location here we were at the Stella Adler Theater on Hollywood Boulevard. And we would do like 2 shows a week and then teach classes. And then we were, we were growing because we were the only long form. I think maybe Bang was around at the time, but we were sort of a bigger name, I guess, at the time. And so we were growing and like eating up all their classroom space. And then they were like, and then it was like, I think we're going to, so we ended up moving to the complex and then we're there for a while and that kind of thing. And yeah, it was crazy. And I sort of knew that we were onto something when we started with my team, which was the Tribe, and we renamed ourselves Bitter No when we came to LA. And we started with our team doing shows, and then we opened up the Armando show, which is coincidental. Teresa Mulligan just posted a picture of the first Armando cast in LA.
Oh wow!
And then just recently, it was like a million years ago or whatever it was. Yeah. And so. But that show opened up, and then all these expats from Chicago Improv Olympic came out of the woodwork.
Yeah.
All of a sudden, like Steve Carell was there, and Nancy Walls was there, and Dave Keckner was there, and then Neil Flynn was there, and then all these people, Pete Holney, Mike Cohn, all these people who had sort of improvised in Chicago who had moved out here to pursue their acting careers, just were like, oh my God. And like they all swarmed in and suddenly it was like full. And we had this really great killer cast for Armando and all this kind of stuff. And it was pretty amazing. It was a great sort of outpouring. People were super excited about it. And then we were getting selling out our classes of new students and forming team. And it was like a rocket right at the beginning. It's like class, bing, 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 make a team, make another team, more classes, ding, ding, ding. This kind of thing was crazy.
Wow. All because you took Sharon out to lunch and said, "Hey, what about this?"
Yeah, it's I kind of wanted my cake and eat it too. I wanted to be in LA, but I also wanted to do the kind of improv that I was doing and bring the thing that I loved with me. And like most things that I think shake out in the biggest picture, I was really just scratching my own itch. I was just like, this is something that I want, and why aren't we doing this? Why haven't we done this? And then it turns out because no one had thought of it before.
I love it. You wrote a book. There, even now, there still aren't that many books on improv, but less so when yours came out. And Like, what was the thought process of, hey, I'm gonna create a book on improv?
Yeah, that's a great question. I have been teaching for a while, and I had sort of landed on this idea of the triangle of the scene. It was just like a thing, my approach, the thing that I was doing, and so I felt really good about it, really proud of it. And I was like teaching it at some workshops or like festivals here and there or whatever, this triangle of the scene. And then I thought well, let me sort of backtrack a moment, because I think sort of the origin of that idea is important, is that I had been teaching for a while. And then one day, like at the end of every session at IO, we would do these surveys, and people would sort of like what worked for them, what didn't work for them, what did they like, not like, all this kind of thing, which was super, as a teacher, was super helpful to me.
Yeah.
And that's just sort of like why I jettisoned some exercises and brought in new ones and this kind of thing. And so one of the things, this is going to sound really random, but it was super important, was this woman wrote, I'm saying woman, but I just know from her, it was all anonymous, but she had lovely, lovely handwriting that I feel like no guys have. But anyway, she wrote, I feel like I'm leaving this class with a set of tools that I can use to improvise consistently. And I was like, oh, tools. Like, just the idea of thinking of it as tools was like a paradigm shift for me. And I was just like, oh, tools. And so once I sort of had it that way, then all of a sudden it really made a big difference to me. And I was just like, oh, this is a set of tools. That means it's capturable. Because I think sort of for a long time as a teacher, and a lot of improv teachers, myself included, we are coaching or teaching experiences or feelings or vibes or whatever. And that's all part of it, man. That's all. The magic is what it is. And and I tell my students all the time, look, just try this on for size. One night you're going to be doing a show and you're going to do the opposite of every single thing I'm telling you. And it's going to be fucking gold.
Nice.
Follow that, ride that lightning. But there's going to be a night where you don't know what to do next. And then you have these tools. You always can come back to these tools because these are always going to work. These are always going to help you out. And when you don't have that lightning, you have this. You have this craft, right? Because there's like the craft and then there's the art. And we all are aspiring for the art, but we need a little craft underneath us.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
Anyone can make a chair, like a carpenter can make a chair, but then an artist takes it to like the next level. And you're like, oh, wow, okay, we're rethinking chairs on a level that's like, what, right? So once I sort of had this paradigm shift of thinking of it as tools, then I realized it was something I could communicate to people, because I think that I was carrying with me a bias from Dell when a comment that he made about writing truth and comedy, he didn't think it was going to work, because he said it's like writing down a religion. It's impossible. It's like an oral tradition that we're going to try to capture in this static frame or whatever. And I think I sort of felt that same kind of thing. But for years, I'd kind of been nurturing this idea, but I never really sort of got a hook on it. But then once I realized tools, then I was like, okay, I think that's it. And then it was like pretty straightforward. Then I could really write the book and write the tools and write examples that illustrated that, and then do videos that illustrate or show the games in motion, which I thought was really important because it is an oral tradition. It is seeing something in action and then applying it. Because otherwise, sort of Dell's reservation was you write this down and people misinterpret it, or they sort of take it this way or that way or whatever. And then you have to kind of see it. You have to sort of catch it as like a virus from the people before and sort of like see it in motion, Yeah. And so the videos were super important to me, a super important element of the book.
Oh, that's great. So what is the triangle of the scene?
Great.
For people who don't know.
Great. For those people who don't know. The triangle of the scene sort of really comes out of a bigger discussion about what is the game of the scene, right? In Chicago, when I was going through classes and really trying to figure out what is the game of the scene, if there's something that didn't work for me, it was maybe the sort of idea of like, what is the game of the scene, and the sort of the unicorn hunt of trying to figure out what the game of the scene was. UCB's really sort of nailed it down. In their interpretation, it's super clear of what they think it is, and they have articulated that version of it super clearly. I think that's really important, right?
Yeah.
So, but that version doesn't totally work for me. I have different priorities of stuff that I want to see in the scene. So it sort of comes out of a discussion of like, what is the game of the scene? So in the triangle of the scene, we're talking about the triangle, and the three sides of the triangle are, what am I doing, or what's my character's big thing or point of view? What are you doing? What's your character's big thing or point of view? And then where are we doing, or what are we doing it about? right? So that's a triangle. What am I doing? What's my point of view? What are you doing? What's your point of view? Where are we, or what are we doing? And if you have those three things, those three active verb things, then you have a scene that's going to happen. A lot of times people talk about crow or about who, what, where, but who, what, where are all sort of nouns. They're sort of static things, right? And also I feel like I just taught a class yesterday and we had a big discussion about this. I feel like that the idea of, hey, can we have a relationship from the audience? And they say mother-daughter. That's not a relationship. Those are labels of two people, and the relationship is a dynamic idea of how they relate to each other. A more accurate response would be, if we can sort of just teach the audience this, a more accurate response would be domineering mother and passive daughter, or passive mother and domineering daughter. That's a relationship because that's how they relate to each other, right? And I feel like the what I love about the triangle of the scene, or what people seem to like about it as well, is that it captures this dynamic idea of how we relate to each other, right? Not just like who we are to each other, but how we relate to each other. Because you could do 100 doctor-patient scenes, all different based on how that doctor and patient relate to each other.
Absolutely.
Right? Yeah. So that's a triangle of the scene. When I talk about what's your point of view or whatever, I'm talking about big playable gifts. Big in the sense that it's something, I believe that you should be giving big playable gifts to your partner, and they should give them to you as well. That's the A game as far as I can figure it. The B game is you give yourself something else, right? That's the annoyance style. You give yourself something and you sort of come in with this thing, which is great as well. But for me, I like to give my partner and be gifted by my partner a big playable gift. Big in the sense that it's something I can do in this scene and in other scenes. Playable in the sense that it's something that I can do, right? Not just something that I am, but something that I can do, right? And then that I can play. And then a gift in the sense that it's something that's going to sort of make me look good, or be fun to play, or like really sort of like challenge me in a fun way, right? So a gift wouldn't be like, you're a tree and you can't talk. Like, that's not a gift, right? That's really, exactly. You're sort of penning someone in. So you really want those three things. Big, playable, gift. That's sort of the linchpin of it, and giving those ideas to each other right at the beginning of the scene.
I love it. I love it so much. And it's so concrete, because I'm sure you experienced this too. The thing that I rebelled against was, I had great teachers, but there was so many notes that were kind of vague and esoteric. They weren't tools, they were just kind of like, oh, this and the other. I'm like, I don't know what to do with that. And like what you're saying is just so specific. It's like, oh, we know we can do something with that.
Right. I think that's what I sort of love about teaching level 1 is really sort of nailing down these specific craft elements. And I hate to say it because it sounds so overwrought, but these really concrete elements that people can use as tools. And as I told this class yesterday, like once someone gives me a big playable gift, and once they have a big playable gift, then that's like a handle, right? And I can grab that handle and I can move that character around to different scenes and put them in meaningful juxtaposition to other things, right? It makes it a tangible, usable, workable tool, right? And as opposed to, well, like you're saying, this sort of like feeling about improv. And I think that's important. I think there's some people that do a lot of this higher level, sort of, I'll say higher level, but this sort of other sort of take on it where they work a lot on feeling, to get people to feel about it or to release the rules or whatever. But and that's great. But I feel like for me, what I think I really excel at is, and what I teach about teaching the basics and then teaching the Herald, is that there are specific concrete elements that you can put together and you can sort of like pretty reliably create good scenes and create good heralds. I really am a believer in that. And then everyone can do the craft, and then some people can take it to the art and they can sort of like elevate it to that next level, right? Anyone can paint a picture, but some people can paint the Mona Lisa.
Ooh.
Right? But everyone can have fun painting. There's an old saying like, we're just go out there and have fun. Great, let's go out there and have fun. I have more fun when it's going good.
Yeah.
And not fucking sucking. Like,
Yeah.
And I've been in shows that suck. It's not fun.
Sure.
There's no fun there to be had for you or the audience.
Right. Yeah. Yeah.
So I think we have some tools. We can always sort of keep the show and the sort of the work at a certain level. I think it's great.
Keep the floor to where it doesn't get too low. Yeah.
Right. Totally. And then let's have fun within those things. But I think a lot, and I sort of say a lot, this quote from Viola Spolin that is like, a spark out in the world is just a spark, but a spark in a box is an explosion.
Ooh.
Yeah. So, so we need some limits. We need some like sort of boundaries around our art to make it sort of this thing, or else it's just like this shouting to the void in the world, right? You need for art, for me, what that is choice. An artist is someone who makes choices. And so bang, 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 bang. So then we make choices like the scene's about this, it's not about this. Your big thing is this, and my big thing is that, and all those things sort of help us hone and take all of our creativity from being like a spotlight illuminating everything, and then we sort of make choices and really get it down to being bang, a laser beam that then can cut through anything. A spotlight is great, but it can't cut through things. It can't do that work. Whereas if you take all that creativity, all that same creative energy, and focus it down on these specific targets, bang, suddenly you're doing work. Suddenly you're making things happen in a really deliberate, powerful way, right?
Oh my God, I love it. I'm geeking out hard here, Paul. Geeking out real hard.
Me too.
I could talk to you all day, but where do you want to send people? You've got a YouTube channel. What are your plugs?
For sure, man. I think that the main thing that I love people to check out is probably PV, like Paul Vaillancourt, PV Improv on YouTube. That's all the improv tips, like you said, and stuff like that. And then also, I'm this is sort of like a pre-plug. I'm finishing up work on a ebook, a free ebook that I'm working on about sort of like 4 things. It's about a lot of things, but basically it's about 4 things that improvisers can do at home to stay creative, inspired, and have fun. And I'll be distributing that through the YouTube channel and also to my Instagram, What's Up with PV, What's Up with PV on Instagram and Twitter, and like that. So Instagram and YouTube are where you mostly hang out.
I love it. I'll put all those in the show notes as well. And what are you just keep giving gifts to the art of improv. You got another book coming. I mean, you're such a gift giver and a leader, and we're just as someone who's known about you. And I don't know if you know this, we actually got to improvise together one time. I think it was about a year and a half ago. So it was at Acme NoHo, and it was one of those shows where there was like 15 people. It was just a big conglomeration of people, and I didn't know everyone there. And it was my first, because I knew of you, but we'd never met. And I was like, Paul Vaillancourt's here, and I got a little been doing this shit 20 years, and I just got a little whoa, And there was one time where you came out and did a scene, and I was like, that I will regret it forever if I don't come out now, because I didn't know when we were gonna get to perform, if it ever happened again. And it was just a moment where I was like, that was one of my heroes that I'm getting to play with. It was just
my gosh, that's so nice. Thank you. What was the scene about? Do you remember?
Yeah, we were. It was at the Acme in the stage to the right, which was kind of the smaller stage. So we played out in the audience, and it had something to do with getting a haircut or something like that. I don't remember the specifics, because just at the end I was just like, I just got to do it.
Yeah. I got you. That was like allegedly or something, right?
Yeah.
Sort of like an Armando-ish, allegedly. Oh, yes. I remember now. Yes, great. That's awesome.
Good
That's so fun.
Thank you so much, Paul, for being on the Improv Breakdown.
Oh my gosh, thank you. I can't believe it's over already.
Thank you so much for watching. If you have any questions about improv, please put them in the comments below. To get notified about upcoming episodes, subscribe to the Roland and Rich's YouTube channel and click the little bell icon below. Thanks, improvisers, and keep making each other look good.